So, welcome back to the Natural Resilience Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Graham Fitzgerald, the COO of the Irish Football Association. Graham, thank you very much for coming in.
Pleasure, Kieran. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm delighted. I'm delighted to have you in. And the irony is, we're not kicking off this interview talking about football because through your role with the IFA, there's been a bit of history made. A different sport in boxing. The Clear Twist National Stadium at Windsor Park hosted a boxing event with a difference. It was the first time that two men from the island of Ireland have fought for a world title. They fought in the welterweight division, which is always traditionally one of the superior weight divisions within boxing. It happened in Belfast. It was beamed across the world, and of course, a local lad, Lewis Crocker, came out victorious. And we now, once again, it's amazing our history with boxing, but we now have a world champion in Lewis, which is fantastic. I'm really, really interested to get what it was like from an IFA perspective, because I know an event of that magnitude, there must have been so many moving parts. Can you give us an overview of, I suppose, what it was like from early stage discussions right through till kind of the first bell going and the events live?
Yeah, sure. Well, I suppose we're about 10 days on from the event now, Kieran, and I suppose the dust has properly settled and we've had a chance to reflect and consider how it went. And thank goodness it all went very, very well. You know, operationally, everything was excellent. All the reviews that we've sort of seen so far have been very positive. And of course, the result on the night kind of topped it off. Mm-hmm. You know, it was an amazing occasion, and even more amazing to be able to kind of fulfill the dreams of a local boxer and crown another world champion from Northern Ireland. I think there's only been maybe 9 or 10 boxing world champions from this part of the world. So we feel very privileged to have been the host to the most recent one, and able to showcase our stadium as the multi-purpose venue that it truly is. So weeks and weeks of planning and preparation went into it, of course. And maybe if I take you right back to the genesis of how it came about, I suppose every great event starts with an idea. And we had the idea that, you know, Carl Frampton had fought in the stadium in 2018, and that was a wonderful event and has great memories for everybody involved. So I guess this year we felt like we'd love to be able to recreate that again. So myself and our director of communications, Danny Lynch, he's our big boxing fan within the football world, so he already had quite a bit of knowledge. But him and I went to meet Carl for a coffee, and we basically just asked Carl, was he aware of any up-and-coming boxers that may be able to top a bill similar to he did at our venue. And by a bit of luck and coincidence, Lewis was fighting Donovan for the first time in a couple of weeks at the SSE after that meeting. And in many ways, you know, luck does play a big part in these events as well, although we like to call it maybe strategic luck. Mm-hmm. The harder you work, the luckier you get, that sort of thing. But the fact that fight finished how it did, and the fact that a rematch was set, and then the fact that the American lad, Jaron Ennis, vacated his belt and moved up a weight, meant that suddenly the stars aligned and the world title shot was on. So Carl introduced us to Matchroom, to Frank Smith, and we really ran with it from there with Matchroom. And they're an amazing organisation. You know, they're very, very impressive, very professional, very easy to work with. So we just embraced the whole Matchroom promotion, and our team really put their shoulder to the wheel in terms of making the venue ready and set for the event that happened on the 13th of September.
I love that, the timing. You know, the stars aligned in many ways, the timing was right, but I also love the fact that there was that proactive element from IFA as well, with regards to, you know, thinking outside the box. How do we implement that continuous improvement? I was at the Carl Frampton's one. It was phenomenal. I think somebody described it in the right way. It was almost like a send-off to Mark what was a phenomenal career. But I think just with that really lucky element for Lewis and Paddy Donovan, it was for a world title. Like, there was a lot at stake, and to have the first fight end in a way where there was so much controversy, which gets people hooked in.
Yeah.
It was just that perfect timing in
Well,
many
we
ways.
probably saw our opportunity. You know, I watched that fight. I mean, I'm not a massive boxing fan, but I watched that one with interest. And when it ended like it did, we probably saw this could be our opportunity.
Yeah.
So we got into discussions with Matchroom. And of course, there has to be a negotiation as well to convince them, because we were highly motivated, you know. So Matchroom could tell that we were keen and eager, but and we felt they were as well. But of course, there had to be a little bit of back and forward. But they were very straightforward to deal with. Frank and Eddie are real gentlemen to deal with. We got it arranged. Jamie was closely involved as well, and we got the date set. And then it was really down into operational planning and working with all the different stakeholders that we have. And I must just give credit to all the stakeholders that enable this event as well. You know, probably first and foremost, Linfield Football Club were very courteous, because we share the venue with them, and they were drawn away that weekend. Again, maybe another little bit of luck or fortune, but of course they were very gracious. Lewis is a Linfield fan, so that was another little connection. But they were great in sort of allowing us to have the venue for that weekend. And of course, we worked closely with the City Council in terms of safety certificates and all the accreditation that we needed. And indeed the police as well. I can't speak highly enough of the PSNI and our close working relationship with them in terms of putting all the planning together. And interestingly for us, there was probably three major objectives once we sort of set the date and agreed that we were going to do this. And the first thing was to sell enough tickets. You know, Matchroom were a little bit nervous moving to the larger venue. So they needed to sell enough tickets to make it viable for them. And of course, we felt we could help with our fan base and maybe this kind of similar demographic between football and boxing spectators. So we aimed for around 12 to 14,000 tickets. We ended up selling 16. So great success for both Matchroom and ourselves. And then secondly, we were nervous, of course, about covering the pitch. You know, we had to make sure that the stadium was turned around and ready to be used again for football straight afterwards. And finally, we just wanted to make sure that it was a safe and secure event for all participants and spectators, because we had been aware that perhaps at the end of the last fight as well, there was a little bit of unideal sort of end to that in terms of the crowd. So we were conscious of that and planned accordingly. But thank goodness, there was no trouble at all at our event.
Well, we were speaking off camera. I mean, I was at it and remarked on the family-friendly, carnival's the wrong word, but a very relaxed, celebratory atmosphere from everyone leaving the stadium out onto Boucher Road and back in again. I mean, it felt pivotal. It felt as if the city had delivered something world-class, and irregardless if you were supporting Paddy Donovan or you were supporting Lewis or any of the undercard, you got this real sense of pride where the city won, you know, boxing won. It was fantastic. But I want to use a word, collaboration. You spoke there, Matchroom, the City Council, PSNI, all the different stakeholders. From the outside looking in, what really came across was that collaborative piece where I think traditionally sometimes you run the risk of getting big historic organisations, IFA, Matchroom, the council, and everyone needs to work within their own framework. But there seemed to be, and maybe you can shed some light on it, there seemed to be an agreement that there's a vision here and we need to work together to bring this vision to life, because even as we're collaborating on social media posts, both IFA and Matchroom, and it just seemed to, if I look at the marketing journey, it was almost done perfectly, because there was a short enough runway for it. There was a short enough from announcement to the event itself. Was it 2 months? Or?
Yeah, it was probably only 6 to 8 weeks by the time we sort of signed the agreement with Matchroom to the event date. So we all had to work at pace and very collaboratively, and you know, had to get everybody bought into the concept. And another, you know, group of stakeholders that we just like to put on record our thanks to are our neighbours and local residents. You know, the people who live around the stadium are very understanding and very accommodating when we want to do major events like this. And we maintain an excellent relationship with our residents and our neighbours, and they're one of our most important stakeholders. So we just want to express our thanks to them as well. And of course, all the other tenants in the stadium and Olympia Leisure Centre and Lidl and Niffle and everyone, because the stadium is used by many more operators than just ourselves. So it's important to recognise all those individuals. And of course, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people don't really realise, and there's probably 3 big contractors or suppliers or service providers that really enable the event from our perspective as well. Because Matchroom, of course, make the production, but we sort of provide the venue and all the venue services. So for us, I'd just maybe also like to thank EventSec and Andy Murphy. They put a huge amount of effort into the safety and security. Our caterers and food and beverage providers, Pan and Pour, previously known as Hospitality Belfast, put a lot into it through Andrew Dugan as well. And finally, maybe just a bit of recognition for our pitch contractor, Clive Richardson, CRL Limited as well, turned the pitch around and got it back into condition for Linfield to use last Saturday again. And the pitch covering, it was only 4 days. It went down. Preparations really started in earnest, actual physical operating preparations on the Wednesday evening. So the pitch started to be covered on the Wednesday evening, and of course it was uncovered again on Sunday. So really, really tight turnaround with, hundreds of contractors on site. I remarked to somebody that I'd never seen as many people in the stadium while the gates were still closed. Wow. So even before we had a single spectator in the stadium, there were hundreds of people working on hundreds of different jobs and disciplines to kind of get the event ready for the global audience, really. Obviously TV was a massive part of it as well through DAZN, and it went out, to global broadcast. So
I'm interrupting this podcast briefly to make you aware of a very special event happening on Sunday, the 18th of January, 2026. The Hero's Journey is a self-development event with a difference. It takes place in the Europa Hotel. It's going to help you unlock your inner compass and create the map so that 2026 becomes your best year to date. We have some massive guests that are going to be announced very soon, as well as a live podcast thrown in for good measure. So tickets are live on Eventbrite or through the website, and we would love to see you there. There was one picture. So obviously, what you had the big screens. It was a world-class setup because it's beamed around the world. The big screens hanging down from just above the ring. I remember looking up before Lewis and Paddy came into the ring, and there was a drone shot or an airplane shot of the stadium lit up, and you could see the lights around it. And I was thinking, that's our city, and it's being viewed in America, and it looked fantastic. It really did. I want to ask a question with regards. So, 6 to 8 weeks, a hell of a lot of work to bring that one picture to life, to bring that event to life around the world. But we have met earlier this year, and I have an insight into how busy your life is, and the team, how busy the team is at the best of times. Linfield are playing football. The show must go on. You have a pretty tight schedule with regards to running the IFA. What sort of pressures did that bring with there now has to be a percentage of our focus, energy and commitment to delivering this massive project? Yeah. And still we can't take the foot off the gas with everything else that we do.
Exactly. But because it was so different, because it's outside the norm for us, it's quite motivating and inspiring in and itself. Quite often there's the line that a change is as good as a rest. And for some of our own internal staff teams, they found it quite interesting and engaging to get involved in something that they don't normally, isn't part of their normal routine, and maybe 3 teams internally are just worth a little bit of a call out. To give you an idea of the preparation that went in from our side, one is obviously the stadium team in terms of safety and security. The other is the commercial team in terms of ticketing and hospitality. And finally, our communications team, of course, led on a lot of the awareness and the marketing and that kind of stuff. And one thing that is really maybe worth noting as well, boxing and football can often still be seen as male-dominated kind of industries, but 2 individuals from our organisation who were pivotal to the success of this event are 2 of our kind of strongest emerging female leaders. So our head of stadium operations is a lady called Anita Hamilton, And she led, of course, on all the safety and security and looked after that major objective for us, while Norrie Clark, our head of ticketing and fan engagement, got involved in making sure that we sold enough tickets and made the event a major success. And she was probably one of the ones closest to the Matchroom team. And it was funny because she's since watched the documentary on Netflix about Matchroom, The Greatest Showman. And it's very interesting. But of course, now she knows and has personal relationships with a lot of people in that little series. So it was a nice kind of bookend to the event for her as well. But I think those two individuals deserve a lot of credit, and just showing you how females were leading the way in what might have been a male-dominated event, or seen as that.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, somebody that was in attendance, there was a lot of families.
Yeah.
There was actually a lot of kids. I noticed a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers, a lot of women as well. Like,
yeah.
Is there a difference in demographic between the boxing fan and the football fan? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, originally we thought there was quite a lot of crossover, and still think there is, but we're also convinced that there were a high percentage of that crowd in the stadium that night for the first time. I mean, we could tell that even by their lack of familiarity of where to go. So that was very pleasing from our point of view, to be able to bring a new audience to the stadium and show them how outstanding a venue it is. And hopefully they will come back again for a different event, maybe for the football, and maybe in the future, hopefully for a music gig, because having had the confidence of completing the boxing twice now, we think that the natural progression would be to try and hold a concert or some type of appropriate music venue at the stadium, because it's perhaps not as big as some of the big 40,000 capacity venues, but it is bigger than some of the smaller indoor venues. So there must be that sort of artist for which we would be the sweet spot in terms of capacity. So we're working hard with all of the local promoters to try and find a date, hopefully even next year, when we could get the music going. Because even when during the boxing and the sound gets up and the ring walks, the acoustics within the stadium are outstanding. And, it's a very modern facility in an excellent location with, all of the appropriate infrastructure. So we think it's a no-brainer, but it's just about maybe finding the right artist on the right date.
I, again, as the consumer that went and paid for a ticket and it was there, I was blown away. I know Matchroom and DAZN do things to a really high standard, but the acoustics from the screens that played like the short 30-second clips, I mean, the sound and audio quality was second to none, but it's the infrastructure too. You're out and in your car and on the motorway. Like it's far superior to a lot of large venues with a lot of large footfall. It's almost in many ways a hidden gem.
Yeah.
And you're almost thinking like, wow, the potential here was that and with regards to the debriefing, was it a case of we could do more of these massive large scale events?
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, we sold all of those credentials to Matchroom, and often we're also selling those credentials to UEFA, because we think the Clear Twist National Stadium at Windsor Park is just, it's perfect in many ways because of its location, its proximity, its public transport links. Now the railway line runs right behind us, and the stop at Adelaide Halt has been upgraded by TransLink. So there's a simple walk from that station now right in the back of the stadium through a proper paved and fenced walkway that only opened last year there. So people are still becoming familiar with the ability to take the train right to the ground, and for egress out of the ground as well, the train is absolutely ideal. But equally, there's nice space at the front there around Olympia. The two artificial grass pitches there we often use for what we call like temporary overlay, whether that's marquees for accreditation or ticket distribution or whatever it happens to be. There's plenty of space around the stadium, and in many ways you could say it's even walkable back to the city centre. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we can't see any downsides, and think that any promoter or any event, they need to come and have a look and realise that we're open for business.
I love what you said, that there was a large percentage of people in the stadium that night that had never been to the stadium before. It had to be a massive net gain for the brand of IFA. Just to showcase it to people that maybe aren't football fans at all, mm-hmm. maybe they've never been to the stadium, I mean, I suppose then, Graham, it begs the question: how do you keep that momentum going with showcasing the brand at such scale?
Yeah. Well, of course, we'll never forget that our core is football as well, and we have Germany and Slovakia coming next month, and then Luxembourg in November. So we've got three big, massive fixtures ahead of us, and we'll always do those to the highest standard as well. In fact, it was interesting, some of our football people took a little bit of a break when the boxing was on. So some of them almost had the weekend off, and only some of them were that interested in the boxing. So they maybe had a little bit of a down period, whereas now they're going to be hugely busy with the international fixtures coming. But it's about trying to demonstrate that the stadium is multi-purpose. We can do different things, outdoor events. And sometimes as well, we look a little bit enviously towards Dublin and see that they've been able to attract American college football. So that's something else that maybe is on our radar, along with the music gigs. So there's all different types of opportunities. And for a capacity of roughly around 20,000, we think there are other events that we could attract, and we'll be working hard to do so and build on that momentum, and keep the sort of testimonials from the boxing now, and the shots and the drones and the atmosphere is probably our USP really, that you can get a unique atmosphere within our stadium because of the enclosed bowl and because of its size. It's not too big, it's definitely not too small, and it has probably a bit of a unique atmosphere, contributed to, of course, by the Belfast and Northern Ireland crowd, who can get noisy when they get excited.
Eddie Hearn, in a few of his kind of interviews on the run-up to it, referenced Belfast a lot. He referenced the fact that it's a global fight city, like the boxing fraternity and the boxing world hold Belfast in such high regards, with atmosphere, with their boxing knowledge, the fact that they get behind their fighters, but they know the sport. And I think that really, really came across, because the undercard was heavily supported as well. I mean, the cheers, it was a really good atmosphere throughout.
Yeah.
And again, I watched it back the next evening, and to hear the atmosphere just slowly building from those fights beforehand that were televised, and just hearing that reaching peak was something special.
And the undercard was quite important for us, because there were some local boxers who are up and coming on that undercard, and we'd love to see a few of them progress to, the sort of world title stage, and maybe they would come back and use our venue when they're top of the bill. So that was very important for us. And as far as we can understand as well, Matchroom were very, very satisfied with the event. And really the biggest compliment to us as the Irish FA afterwards would be Matchroom, explaining or expressing that we were easy to work with, that we made their lives easy. We were a good venue to come in. And they work with all venues all over the world, so they know what good looks like. Yeah. And I think they have expressed to us a pretty high level of satisfaction with dealing with us, and I think they'd be motivated to come back. Hopefully Lewis might get the chance to defend his title back at the stadium, and we'd love to have him.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. I didn't know if I could, but was there, I'm sure there was some form of debrief with the other agencies after. Was there a conversation with, we want to do this again?
Well, as soon as the result went in his favour, I was texting Matchroom and texting Jamie to say, count us in for the defence. Because, I mean, it's brilliant, it's brilliant to support Northern Ireland athletes in that way and provide the show. Like, really all we did was provide the stage. He did all the hard work. So, but it's excellent for, civic pride, and excellent for sporting, because sport changes lives. Totally. We all know that through football, through boxing. And if we can provide the platform for those athletes, then we're absolutely delighted to be able to do that.
You mentioned Dublin and then putting on big sporting events and big concerts. And I look at it with jealousy. I'm actually down there this weekend. The Pittsburgh Steelers are coming over and playing in Croke Park. I think 80,000 tickets are sold. I don't know the exact figure, but I think it's hundreds of millions of dollars then goes into the Dublin economy. Hospitality, hotels, restaurants, taxis, the fan experience. I know you have a financial background, and we'll get into that. Has there been figures or ballpark figures released about the money that went into the economy here in Belfast because we were able to pull off an event of that scale?
We haven't necessarily done an economic analysis of this particular event, but we're absolutely convinced that there were extra bed nights. The nighttime economy had a boost from this event. Food and beverage, bars and restaurants would have gotten an extra turn out of it. And of course, when people come to the city, they go to other visitor attractions. And even things like taxis and public transport, everything gets a lift. A rising tide lifts all boats. So major events like this they are a no-brainer, and they do have an economic injection of cash into the economy. So it goes without saying that we'd like to see more of them.
I suppose Graham, if you could give us an overview of your career, because KPMG, the Kerry Group, you've worked on the international stage with the financial hat on. If you could maybe give us an overview of your career, but what I'm really interested in is this event's about to take place. You have 18,000 people coming to your office. How do you commercialise that so that the IFA are coming away thinking like this was closing the pitch for 4 days, bringing in extra staff? It was not just commercially viable, but commercially a very good decision.
Yeah, well, of course, every commercial decision we make as well, Kieran, is really the driver behind it. The objective is to create, a little bit of a commercial upside so that we can put that back into football. Everything we make, we reinvest. So from that point of view, any other event that comes to the stadium, if non-football people are looking at wondering why we do it for football, so that the money made can be reinvested. So that's just an important point to note, that football is the ultimate winner from anything that happens at the stadium. And look, working in sport is an absolute privilege. I consider myself very, very fortunate and lucky to have the role that I have. Previous to this, I'd always worked in commercial industry where, you're getting up every morning to really make shareholders wealthy. And that's not the case now. We get up every morning now to really have a positive impact on society. And that's a whole lot more rewarding and fulfilling than any previous roles that I'd had. But I suppose I have worked overseas as well, which also makes you appreciate home a little bit more. I relocated back from the US almost 20 years ago now and have no regrets. It was nice to work away, but always great to come home. And I suppose I spent then 12 years in haulage and logistics industry. And that's quite a tough industry, so I probably cut my teeth commercially there and maybe developed a lot of skills and attributes that I'm now able to deploy in the Irish Football Association for a greater purpose, you might say,
It's probably a very basic question, Graham, but that global experience of seeing things, how they're done on an international level, I'm assuming that served you well when you did come home with, entering into the IFA with your own ambitious drive and vision.
Yeah, well, even how that came about, I suppose. I left school and did not go to university. So I took a bit of a non-traditional route. Perhaps when I completed my A-levels, I probably underperformed a little bit there and was facing a scenario where it would have been potentially repeating or going into the world of work. So I was given an opportunity from KPMG in Belfast to do what was effectively an apprenticeship. It was called an accounting technician route. So that involved me studying while working at the same time for 6 consecutive years to become a chartered accountant. So I went straight in there at 18, and I always remember a funny story. I joined in about the August time of 1995, and by the time we got to October, I was still new to the world of work, completely naive and green. And I remember asking my boss, how many days we got off for Halloween, and he just shook his head at me and said, "Welcome to the world of work." So no time off at Halloween that year, and I suppose 6 years there, qualified as a chartered accountant. And then maybe because I'd missed the opportunity to travel as a student, I took it as a young professional and went to the US to work for the Kerry Group in food manufacturing. And it was interesting because most of that time was in the US. I was there for 4 years in total, but part of it was spent in Mexico, and part of it was spent in Canada as well. So I probably covered the 3 jurisdictions that are going to host next year's World Cup. So I would love to see us, Northern Ireland, there competing in that World Cup, a bit like in 1986 in Mexico. And it's also funny that by the time I was 10 years old, Northern Ireland had qualified for 2 World Cups in a row, And I just presumed as a 10-year-old, I thought, well,
It's a done
we're
thing.
obviously a top 5 nation in the world. We go to every World Cup. And of course, it's been 40 years since. So I don't know, maybe it's written in the stars, who knows, but we'll all be keeping our fingers crossed that we find ourselves back there next summer.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the perfect leeway to go in and talk about football. One thing that struck me was my son's 12 and had to register to play football, and the email came back with the IFA branding.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made me think about the numbers of people that play the sport. I mean, there must be thousands of kids. But give us an overview of the amount of people that you guys touch through the sport of football as IFA.
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands every weekend, isn't it? And, you know, we feel very proud and privileged that football is really the global sport. You know, it's the number one favourite sport. You stop any child in the street and they'll probably list football as their favourite game, their favourite pastime. And it's because, I guess, there's no barriers to entry. You know, all you need is a ball and 2 jumpers and off you go, you've got a game. So we understand. But with that, of course, comes great responsibility for us as well, that we get to govern the world's favourite sport in our country. So we take our responsibilities very seriously and try to provide the appropriate opportunities at all age groups. And really, the biggest thing that we probably need more of in this country are facilities. You know, and any money and investment that can be put into facilities, that's to be welcomed, because it's really giving people the opportunity to play the game with the proper facilities in the proper conditions. But the growth of the girls and women's game has probably been the most recent phenomenon that has really, you know, doubled the scale of football and really, that's where we see the growth, and it's wonderful to see. I mean, I have 2 daughters, and they both love to watch football. One plays, and the other one is more of a watcher. So she follows Arsenal women and enjoys every Sunday watching the WSL on the telly. You know, and in many ways they have no interest in men's football. They're more or less dedicated to following the women's game.
It's a phenomenon in itself. I mean, the English team last year.
Yeah.
I think our own Northern Ireland ladies team in previous years.
Yeah.
The amount of girls playing football at a really high standard, I mean, has quadrupled. It's great to see. And I think, again, from the outside looking in, I can see how hard the IFA is working about making the sport of football accessible and inclusive for all and all abilities.
Yeah.
You know, and it really is a global game, and your passion for that really rings through. I love when you said, you know, yes, we held the boxing event and we're very, very proud of that, but one thing that was important to you is that commercial piece is the money from this event gets reinvested back in to football.
Totally. That's what it's all about, you know, and the more investment that goes into the game, the faster it'll grow, the more opportunities everyone has to enjoy it, you know, because that's what it's about. You know, it can be the participative level or, of course, the elite level, and we have responsibilities in both those areas and all levels of the game. So, yeah, for me, it's really the more facilities we have in Northern Ireland, then the greater everyone can enjoy the game.
And I suppose in one way, these big events, whether it's boxing or concerts, they're going to contribute to that with the commercial. I mean, hopefully the commercial side continues to improve, where you're thinking, okay, there's an extra pot of money here that we can reinvest back into grassroots football. Yeah,
we're doing our best from that point of view, yeah. And of course, another one of our major strategic objectives is to create a national football centre. We've got a project underway at Galgorm, just outside Ballymena, because, of course, we have the National Football Stadium. But we've never had a training venue. And in many ways, all of our national teams have prepared and done reasonably well, despite a lack of facilities, not because of good facilities. So we think that there's now, you know, it's now of national strategic importance that we create another piece of legacy infrastructure where our teams can properly prepare in proper conditions. and give them that leg up to be able to, because as Northern Ireland, what we always aim to do is punch above our weight. Excuse the pun, it's true in boxing and it's definitely true in football, where we have to overachieve compared to our scale and our size. And one of the things that we need to be able to do that are our top class facilities. And unfortunately, it's true at the moment, we just don't have them. There's a complete deficit. There are no facilities of that sort of professional standard. So we have a project underway to create that up at Galgorm. Hopefully to be ready by the time the Euros takes place in 2028. Okay. And of course, that'll be for the elite side of football, but also the community side, and wider society will have access to a national football centre, because it's frustrating when people come and visit the stadium, especially young kids. All they want to do is grab a ball and run out onto the pitch, and we have to prevent them doing that because we have to keep it good for match fixtures, obviously. But at a national football centre, that's exactly what we can do. We can throw the balls onto the pitch and let everybody get involved and create, a little bit more national identity and national pride by having a dedicated football centre.
I love that, Graham. I've read about it. The media did touch on this new Centre of Excellence at Galgorm, but can you give us a bit of an exclusive about what that could look like and the impact it could have? You mentioned the word legacy. Yeah. If you could maybe give us an overview of what that may, like an insider's view of what that could entail.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate as well. Again, some luck, strategic luck, you might say, again, working hard at it. But we're lucky to have partnered with Galgorm, because the Galgorm organisation, their owners and their executive are as highly motivated in this project as we are. And in many ways, they're a similar type organisation to Matchroom, where they're highly successful. They're quick at their decision making. They've got very shallow structures where there's not such a depth from owners to decision makers. And, they've probably got a higher risk tolerance than many of the other sort of organisations we work with. So they're the real enabler. We've got the land up there, and we'll be putting on that 6 elite quality pitches and building a sort of flagship centrepiece pavilion building to go along with it, with all the changing rooms, educational facilities, a state-of-the-art gym. And we will sort of try to centralise a lot of our own sort of Irish FA activities in there, whether that's some of the community activities through the foundation, whether it's coach education, trying to upgrade a lot of the grassroots and elite coaches we have here, or whether it's referee development and trying to improve the quality of our match officials. So there's a whole broad range of activities that we carry out, and they're not all conducive to being done at the stadium. So this centre in Galgorm will be basically a second home, and a home that will be more accessible to all of our football family than the stadium necessarily is. So it'll be a game changer. Life after it will feel totally different than life before it. And I think it's something for us all to really look forward to and get behind.
Is the plan already in motion? You said that the land's there. I mean, is contract signed? Is this have we a date for kind of the starting of that work?
Yeah, no, we're definitely past the point of no return on this project. I mean, for example, we'll submit our planning application now before Christmas. Hopefully, we'll have that permission within another 12 months, and then we go to procurement and construction during 2027, and hopefully operational in the early part of 2028. And that will then be a venue befitting of a national team's preparation for Euro 2028. And hopefully that's our own national team. But if not, then it may well be a facility that could be used by any of the participating nations for Euro 2028.
Love it. I suppose going back to you, with regards to leadership, it's a topic that always comes up in these conversations. What on reflection from being involved in the Galgorm project, which is it's selfless in many ways, because I'm assuming the workload, doubles. But for me, leadership's about leaving somewhere in a better place than what you found it, and that Galgorm project undoubtedly does that. Being involved in that, Graham, and also events such as 10 days ago at the stadium, how have you improved as a leader with the learnings and the takeaways and all the moving parts?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably 2 key things that really strike me, Kieran, in terms of our recent experiences with Matchroom and with Galgorm, and that is the two keys, I think, to success are strong relationships and positive attitudes. Because what's really rung home to us is that if you maintain strong relationships with these external parties, and you sort of partner with organizations that have positive mindsets and can-do attitudes, then suddenly everything becomes possible. Nothing seems too daunting or beyond achievable. So I think that's really what it's about. It's about, working collaboratively, involving everybody, understanding where all the strengths are amongst a multidisciplinary team, and making sure relationships are very, very strong within that team. And then just making sure that everybody, shares the same positive mindset, because I sometimes even joke that my own role as COO could be better described as Chief Obstacle Officer. And that means that really we spend our time, circumventing obstacles, getting over hurdles, resolving problems, and, slaloming through any project or any event. Because invariably, difficulty will always present itself. There will always be moments where you think, oh, is this really going to happen? But I suppose in those moments, you've got to hold your nerve. And as a team, we've got to double down and keep the faith. I'm a great believer in just committing to something and then sort of having this positivity that you're going to see it through no matter what. And if everybody works together, there's always a solution to be found. I haven't seen a problem yet really that can't be resolved with the proper skills in the room.
You've quite clearly taken inspiration from how Matchroom and Galgorm do business, and that agileness of getting big projects over the line. Do you feel as if your own team at IFA have upskilled or kind of went beyond being inspired, but been able to integrate how these companies and organisations work?
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, to give credit to our own people as well, what they do give is an enormous amount of discretionary additional effort. There's no such thing as a normal day or normal hours within the Irish FA. People do what needs done, really, and that has to be admired and to be called out and to be given credit for, because, it's their passion, really. And if you can combine your passion and your job, well, then you're a very lucky individual. And many of our team would have that sort of positive attitude where, dare I say it, they really enjoy their work, and they don't necessarily see it as a chore coming and doing their job, and therefore that tends to motivate them to do it to the highest possible quality that they can. But they also all have open mindsets where they realize the importance of continuous improvement and constant learning. So there's a real thirst, appetite for new things, for new skills, for different experiences, and that's, I suppose, what we've been able to provide in recent times, and we hope that continues.
I think you would be hard to find an organisation that has as big as a ripple effect with regards to positive influence and from young people to girls getting involved in sports, but the sheer mass of people that are playing the sport of football. I love this Galgorm project and the fact that it's inspiring another generation of reaching heights that maybe they feel unattainable, when they see elite facilities and now elite players coming through and representing on the world stage. I suppose if we go further afield, you did mention that word legacy. If we were to bring you into the future 10, 20 years time and you're maybe thinking about retirement, how would you like to retire? I mean, what would you like your own thumbprint on the brand that is IFA to look like? What would make Graham proud?
Well, I mean, the first thing I should say is it's definitely never about me. It's an entire team effort, and I suppose it's the perception of the Irish FA as well that we would like to constantly improve. People need to understand as well that we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and we're humble enough to be able to hold our hands up when those mistakes happen and learn from them, because there maybe is an expectation on us to get it right every time, and that's probably just unrealistic. So I think, we'll learn through experiences. We'll get many things right, some wrong. And if we're humble enough to learn from our mistakes and and make improvements as we go. You know, I always think everything in life and business is an iterative process. You know, you make little adjustments, tweaks, and these projects will be like that as well. Galgorm will have to tweak and improve as we go along. So if we can leave a legacy of the association, you know, having done quite a lot in the last 10, 20 years, I think that's something that we can at least point to as tangible infrastructure. And maybe, you know, on the footballing side, I mean, as a football administrator, the one thing that we should never comment on or get involved in is the playing side. So we'll have to leave that to Michael and Aaron. But hopefully, and fingers crossed, there's major tournaments in our future as well. But outside of that, then I think really all we can do is be the team behind the team and try to create an environment where everybody gets the most out of the global game, and we play our part in that.
Graham, I think that's a wonderful way to bring an end to the interview. For me, it's almost leadership summed up with a few final paragraphs there of it's selfless in many ways. It's about leaving people and the organisation and its stakeholders in a better place than what you found them. I think you and your team are absolutely doing that, and it was a real pleasure to get the insights into a little bit of history which took place just under 2 weeks ago. So thank you.
Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.